if this helps one person, then I'm, a happy person. I want to invoke change, and I want to empower people, and particularly women and mothers. They can get help if they need it, and what they're feeling is normal. You're not a bad person for having certain thoughts. It's normal. I want that to come across. And the fact that, mental health issues can affect anybody. Like, it doesn't matter who you are in life, where you're born or your upbringing or your parents or anything, social status or monetary status. If your brain is wired that way, that will happen to you. And there's no shame in that. That's the biggest thing, I think, like this shame thing that we're also afraid of saying we need help.
Help Me See is a podcast that redefines the word vision through vulnerable and real conversations, my own private introspective ramblings about the things that I think about in the wee hours of the morning, and my deep core belief that your nothingness is your everything, and all you have to do is see. I'm Bianca Mora. I'm your host. I am an educator, a photographic artist, and I believe that your daily photo habit can be the key to unlocking the ability to be more present in your everyday life and live deeper into your intention and purpose. We're not about the small talk here. Grab your coffee, get cozy, and let's talk. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Help Me See. Today on the show, we have an amazing guest. Her name is Alison Newman. She is the host and creator of the Art of Being a Mom podcast, and she's a singer and songwriter, a mom of 2, and enjoys honest conversations with artists and creators about the joys and issues they've encountered while trying to be a mom and continue to create. Themes like mental juggle, changes in identity, and how their work is influenced by motherhood, mom guilt, cultural norms, and the patriarchy, feminism, and the value that society gives the artistic mother. In our conversation, we touch on the mental health struggle of postpartum depression. That's something Alison and I share in common. We've both experienced that, so just a heads up there. But really, what I want to pull to the forefront of this conversation is this idea of taking action before we think that we figured out our best laid plans. I think that there's a lot of times where we say, I will be happy when this, or I will start working on that once this part of my life feels more settled, and XYZ. And all of that is full of logic and, good sense. And then it is also crippling and paralyzing, right? Because when is there ever a good time in life to get uncomfortable and start something new? An example that comes to mind is, I remember last year or the year before, no, I think it was last year, I had this idea in my mind of wanting to do a new style of photo session. And for months, I had thought about how I wanted it to go and what I thought it would be like. And when I finally went, and I went to a couple, a friend of the family, and I wanted them to be the pilot of this brand new session type that I was creating. I went there and I did it, and it felt off. It just didn't feel like the way I thought it would. Granted, I don't know that one try is, seeing it through as much, but it just had a very knowing piece inside of me that was like, yep, no, this is a little bit off from what I thought it would be. Now, I spent months glorifying this idea. I spent months thinking, this is going to be amazing. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong, but think how fast I could have gone on to the next thing if I would have taken action sooner. Right. Right. So there's that part of the conversation. And there's also the part of the conversation where it's about worthiness too. It's about wanting to be able to show up in your utmost, form, in your best self skin. And that's wonderful and fine and good and well enough. But at the same time, I think that we need a reminder that no matter what is happening and no matter what time it is, you are enough. Full stop. End of the sentence. Nothing else. You are enough. When I was a little girl, like super little, I remember my teacher told my parents once, it's one of my first ever things that I remember. Oh, she's such a sponge. She just soaks it all up. And my mom would tell that to, all her family members that like, oh, her teacher said, as they would normally ask, like, how is she doing in school? And, oh, her teacher says she's like a sponge, And what's so funny about this is that my parents were not the type to put pressure on me. They were never, oh, if your grades slip, blah, blah, blah. Never, ever, ever. In fact, I distinctly remember coming home with like a D on a test and I was crying and they put it on the fridge because they thought it was funny. Like but just the praise, just the, oh, she's doing so well or whatever, automatically instilled in me the way I interpreted it was, oh, they love this. So from that point on, it was like, I've been wildly uncomfortable with even the possibility of meeting expectations. It's not enough for me to meet expectations. I want to go above the expectation. And at this point in my life, it's exhausting and something I'm really looking at reversing. Maybe not reversing. Maybe that's the wrong word. Not reversing, but it's something that I really want to put down. And the last thing I'll say about it before we get into the show is that, what's so strange is that I'm, 30 something years old now, and I never realized this about myself until very recently. Because my circumstances and the container in which I grew up wasn't like a big red flag. I didn't, have a super hard childhood. I didn't this, I didn't that. It all is so nuanced that it's hard to recognize. And I think that's a really important, it kind of ties this up with a bow, this whole idea of how important it is to come as you are and to be unapologetic with your story and your truth and just knowing how beneficial it is to share that. Because even if you don't feel like your story or your work or whatever is this extreme or exciting or, show-stopping, whatever, there is so much healing and comfort in the mundane and in the middle ground. There's so much that so many people can connect to and say, oh, wait, hey, that's actually me. I didn't have this crazy thing happen to me. And I'm not this, world champion or whatever, what have you. But I can find some of myself in your story. And it's so helpful. Like the reason I was even able to recognize this part of myself that I really want to heal now is because I was listening to a podcast where someone, I don't even remember, she had just referenced like off the cuff. It wasn't even part of the point of the conversation, but she had just referred to something and called it a codependency. And I was like, oh, wait, what? Codependency can look like that too? Wait a fucking minute. Anyway, so that's my spiel. That is why I feel so strongly about having conversations about nothingness and everythingness, because I think there is so much power in all of it. If you enjoy this podcast and you want to learn more about Alison, head over to the show notes. I'm going to put her links there. And if you ever in general just have a comment about the show, or you loved it and you want to leave a review, it would be greatly appreciated. I think that helps more people find the podcast. I don't know, something with the algorithm. And you can do that on the bottom of Apple Podcasts. And then also, if you do enjoy this conversation, make sure you hit subscribe so it doesn't get lost in the ether and you can see when new episodes come out. You never know what you're going to get with this podcast. All right. Now let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Help Me See. Today is a special day. We have Alison Newman on the podcast. And Alison, I have been a guest on Alison's podcast rather recently, and it was just a pleasure of my life. So I'm so excited to have her here. Welcome, Alison.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Alison has the Art of Being a Mom podcast, and I will hand it over to her to kind of talk about what that podcast is about, even though it sounds self-explanatory, but just really the origin of it, how it came to be, and then we'll just go from there.
Cool. Well, yes. So the Art of Being a Mum, or the Art of Being a Mom, if you want to clarify, it's for everyone in the world, not just Australians and English people. I chat to mothers who are creatives or artists, and that's not limited to sort of visual art or music or painters, anybody that creates anything. So I've had business owners, I've had people who've, made things that you might not necessarily think artist. So I believe everybody is artistic. So pretty much anybody that does anything is using some sort of creativity to make things work. I had this idea that during the lockdown, we had a few lockdowns over here, but during one of them in particular, my husband was working from home, my children were at home, and I was finding my space really squeezed. My creativity was like literally the space that I had to work in was getting smaller and smaller because all these other people were in my house. And I went out for a coffee one day and I was just driving along, and all of a sudden, how things just hit you, like you get like a spark. It was like, how are other mothers doing this? Like, how collectively is society continuing to?
How is the world still spinning right now?
And mother and keep the house clean, like all these things. It was literally, I just went, how is this happening? So I started asking people. And then as I was asking them, I thought, you know what? If I'm interested in this, maybe other people are interested in this. So I thought, right, I'm going to record it. I've got all this recording gear because I write music and record. So I've got all the stuff. It's like it's sitting here. I may as well be using it. So I started reaching out to mums who were in the music industry because I thought, look, ease myself in gently. I've never done anything like this before. Let's talk to some people I know and in areas that I'm familiar in conversing in. And then from there, it just basically just was word of mouth, like, through the socials, mostly Instagram is my main platform. And I just hunt people down by hashtags, basically, like creative mum, artistic mum, all this sort of stuff, mum guilt, identity, all this sort of stuff. And I just message people and say, hey, I'm doing this podcast. Do you want to come on? And pretty much everyone would say yes. The only people that have said no are people who perhaps question themselves in their creative ability. So I had some people say, oh, I'm not creative. I'm not the person that you want to talk to. I'm like, that's okay. That's something that you're holding in your head or heart, but I can see you are, so that's why I asked you, but that's okay. And I never force anyone, I have people I've been back to a couple of times just to give them a nudge, and then they have come on and they've been very pleased that they did. So, but it's just like, I just think it's so important to, like, my motto is like, it doesn't matter if you got, one follower or 1 million followers. Like, no one is more worthy than anyone else to have their story shared, we're all in this mothering thing together. We're all just being lumped in and we're feeling our way through and finding our way. And the most sort of supportive thing I find is that everybody is feeling the same way. We're all struggling. We've all got things we're not sure of. We all have questions about mum guilt and identity, how we're supposed to feel. Are we allowed to complain about this? Should we just be so grateful that we have children and we never complain? So it's breaking down these sort of cultural norms, I suppose, which is one of my favourite things to do, and question things and say, why do we feel like this? Is it because of the way we were raised? Is our parents or our mothers felt like they couldn't complain, so we got conditioned to this? Or is it something coming from outside of society putting on us this guilt trip? And so I find I love talking to people anyway, because I'm always really fascinated about why people do what they do. I work in early childhood education, and I'm always fascinated why kids do what they do. So I'm always looking deeper for things. And I know you're the same. It's like you can't just accept things for face value. There's always got to be a reason for something happening. So I love doing that with my guests. And, people are – I had a really lovely comment the other day. I do a couple of Father's Day episodes each year just for a bit of fun, something a bit different. And the Steve Davis, who I had on, who's an interviewer himself who creates podcasts as well, he said that I got under his skin, that he shared more things that he would usually share. So I was like, that is an awesome thing to hear, That's awesome. I'm glad I do that because that's what I want to do.
I can agree with that. I can attest to that. Why do you think, I just love that you had this thought and then you actually did it. Like you actually, how many episodes have you done now so far?
I think, the 63rd one's coming out this week, but I've got probably half a dozen, sitting there to roll out. So yeah. So July last year, I reckon it was about mid-July. It started, and I had a bit of a break over Christmas. Just I thought, I don't know, maybe not everyone would be in listening mode, but then I thought, you know what, I'll keep pumping them out. So pretty much every week, But I need that though. Like I need something to do, and if I'm not doing my singing, because that can't be ongoing all the time. I sort of stop and start a little bit with this album I'm doing. I need to do something. I can't not do something. That's just my mentality, I suppose.
Can you speak about this craving to connect over this? I know you said that it's like I can't be the only one. I can't be. It's like you're driving around and the world is still spinning and you're feeling like, I don't even know, like your skin's going to fall off. It's like, what's happening? Personally, for me, in having the conversations that I have, I feel almost surprised, but not surprised that every time I make a genuine connection with someone and I have those conversations that are deeper than surface level, I get revved up and excited and shocked every time. But it's not shocking that we all relate so deeply to each other, but why are we always so shocked by it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It blows my mind. The fact we've got social media now, we're meant to be more connected than we've ever been, but we're not, you know what I mean? Like we still don't know what's going on. And I feel like there's a lot of, what's the word? People don't want to share honestly. I think people feel like they're going to be judged. And I've had a lot of issues and background with mental wellness and mental health issues. And the best thing I've ever done is talk about them because it gives someone else the ability then to say, it's not just me, maybe I can talk about this. It helps roll it along. So I've gotten over any sort of fear of worrying what people think of me. And that came through with my singing too. Like for many years I used to sing in groups, and as a soloist we'd perform and be judged and critiqued. So I've spent my life being judged and people telling me what they think of me, and I just don't care. Like I just think it's more of a reflection on the person that's giving that feedback or giving that response than what it is about me. So I just want people to share their stuff and not be afraid. And I guess that's how I feel like this podcast can give people, and yours the same, like you give people the opportunity to share as much or as little as they wish. But I feel like just by doing that, someone else that hears that and then goes, oh, okay, so that's normal. Maybe I can talk about this. So then they talk about it and then someone else hears it. So it rolls on and rolls on and rolls on. Because we're not going to change things if we don't talk about them. You know, it's the way I sort of see it is like, I don't know, you can go out and protest about things or whatever things you're passionate about. You can get on the street and do your thing, and that's really good in that moment. But then if you don't continue with that for whatever it is, whatever's passionate to you, I feel like lots and lots of tiny little actions snowball up and create change. Because there certainly is, this generation of women and mothers are really vocal. And I know you guys over there, like there's been a lot of issues we've seen in the media over here that you guys have had to have your voices heard, I suppose. Yeah, we have to do something. You know what I mean? It's like I get frustrated about things not changing, but then it's like if you don't do something, nothing changes. So that's sort of where I come from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it makes me kind of go back to what you said in passing in the beginning, that I also strongly agree with, about how you said you believe everyone's an artist and whatever they're doing is a form of their art. It's not, you know, some people have a hard time relating to the word creative or artist. But I do believe that it's really anyone and anything. It's just, what is that thing for you? And I think this idea of giving voice and encouraging the sharing of it is tied really strongly with this idea, at least for me, that it doesn't have to be someone that has, you know, is at the top of their Mount Everest and knows what they're doing. Like, I find so much power and value, and honestly, more so in the things that aren't all flushed out yet. Something that I've been wrestling with lately is this idea that I've been doing some very deep work on myself in many different ways. But just the other week, I had like a punch in the face from the universe when I realized some like codependent tendency I've had my whole life. And I've never resonated with that word ever. And I realized it's because the only conversations I've had about that were on the more like severe, very blatant, obvious type of behavioral things and whatever. And I just like always let it glaze past me. But someone had said a brief aside of something and referenced it as codependency. And I was like, oh yeah, that's me. Like, I was like, oh my God. And it like whirled me around. And then I've just ever since have just been really just falling into this thought about how important it is for people and me and whoever to not just sit and wait until they feel like they have something good enough to say, you know, like something polished enough or something that feels like, oh, I have all of the background story perfectly articulated. Like, I think that there's so much value in getting out and just talking about what lights you up and what pisses you off and what, you know, whatever it is, because it breathes this power into other people. So it's not just the people that are winning Grammys or whatever that you hear talking. It's people that feel a little bit more in your reach.
Yeah, I think that's true. People that they're relatable and they're in your space. Like when you said there about waiting till you're ready, I had a lady that was going to be on my podcast and she wanted to wait a little bit longer. I can't remember the reasoning, but the sense that I got was that I don't know, but I said to her, look, you do it when you're ready. That's okay. But I sort of feel like the whole idea of this is to do it right now, you know, because wherever you are in motherhood, you're going to have all these different stages that are going to change and going to be challenging in their own way. And it's like you in the trenches now with a newborn, if you're capable of sharing now, that is going to help someone, right? So there's nothing bad about that, if you know what I mean. Like, you don't have to wait till your baby sleeps through the night, or you don't have to wait till they're potty trained, or you know what I mean? There doesn't have to be this end goal before it's time for you to share what you want to share. Does that make sense? And I've been seeing a lot of quotes lately about, I'm not sure about how people feel about manifestation. I know some people can feel like that's a dirty word, but I saw this thing the other day about if you imagine how you feel, how you're going to feel when you get whatever you want, whatever that is, $1 million, like, you know, something really basic. How are you going to feel? And the energy that you put out and the vibes that you have when you feel that good, if you can imagine that, you're halfway there to getting what you want, because it's not the thing that you want. It's not the actual physical thing that will make you better. It's feeling that way that will make you feel better. Does that make sense? I feel like I've just rambled. You know, like, and that's why I think when you feel good, you keep feeling good, because you've got that feeling of, I feel really good, and you'll do whatever you need to, subconsciously perhaps too, to keep that feeling. So it's like you just vibe off yourself. I don't know where that was coming from, but that point of doing things before you're ready. Don't wait till something awesome happens to feel good. Just feel good. That's really simplistic, but you know what I mean?
Hilarious that you say that, because I'm in this wonderful coaching program, and I was doing one of my reflections, and I was like, I think that I've realized that I have a hard time tolerating feeling good. I just think about the things that when something good comes, I've recognized how quickly I'm like, great, but this is going to happen. Great, but now this. It's like I cannot sit in the good. And then on the tail end of that, I was just thinking about how under pressure I felt recently just in life. And then I zoom out and I think, wow, this is pretty much the life I've always wanted. Like, I don't have a full-time corporate job. I'm doing the work that I care about so much. But so I have all of this except for this part. So now I can't feel free and at peace and calm until this part happens. But then once that happens, surely there's going to be something else, you know? So when are we going to stop giving ourselves reasons why we can't feel good yet?
Yeah. It's like when people say, oh, when I lose such and such kilos, I'll be happy then, or, you know, you're always putting your faith in something else. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, this sort of external validation that humans need to feel good. It's like we can't feel good unless someone else allows us to feel good or tells us we can feel good. I was thinking this the other day, you know, it's interesting. I discovered this thing many years ago to try and get a child to understand their place in the world, or we call them windows, learning windows, where they sit within a group or within a social setting. If someone hurts someone else's feelings, you'd say, oh, can you see that you've made them sad? And I started thinking about not using that lately, because it's up to that child if they feel sad or not. You know what I mean? It's not up to whatever behaviour was put on them. They might not actually feel sad. Sort of, as an adult, you realise that you're responsible for how you feel yourself. It doesn't matter if someone is treating you a certain way. You don't actually have to take on that emotion or whatever they're putting at you. Sorry, I'm not articulating.
I'm tracking with you completely.
Hopefully everyone's still with me. You know what I mean? It's like no one else is responsible for how you feel but you. And I feel like from a really early age, we're taught that your response is determined by someone else.
I find myself tripping over my words when I'm trying to navigate a situation with my son, who's 4 now. And I feel like everything I go to say, everything that I've heard a million times before to me and around me. I'm like, I don't want to say that, but I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't like, there's so many things. Like, he hurt his brother and it's like, say you're sorry, but wait, are you sorry? But you didn't mean, I don't know. Like, I'm very aware that this stuff is stemmed from, I just saw someone that posted on Instagram. It was like a role playing of like a mom and her daughter. And it was like the dreaded, be a good girl. We have company, smile, give so-and-so a hug, like just all of these things, no tears. And it's just, I feel like there's so much beautiful awareness of cycles, that we're aware of cycles that we don't want to continue on. But I'm also a little bit stumped about what to do better that still feels productive. Oftentimes I find myself wanting to just be silent, like not silent, but like sit with my kid and see what he has to say. Like I less and less want to be the one that's saying something. And I don't know if that's because I'm stumped. I don't know if that's an intuitive thing. I don't even know yet.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, whatever it is, just go with it, because that's, you know, I feel like that, what you're saying, like we get brought up with all these things around us. And then I think that's what a lot of this mum guilt comes from, because you've got these expectations on you to do things a certain way and raise your child a certain way and have them come out a certain way. And if they don't, that's a reflection on you. And then you get all this stuff from social media, depending on who you follow, about, oh, you shouldn't say this or you should say that or blah, blah, blah. And then you literally feel like what you're saying, you go to say something and you go, oh shit, I didn't say that because that'll do whatever. Oh, no, don't say that. And it's like, whatever happened to just, like what you're saying, this intuitiveness is coming out of you. This is your true mothering coming out. And it's like we've lost that just intuitiveness of, I don't know, because we've got all this stuff being stuffed into us and told us what to do and what to do and what to do and what not to do. Yeah, I don't know.
There's so much there. I want to hear a little bit more about your background in you said early childhood development, but still also the music that you create. And I'm wondering if there's I'm assuming there's a through line between your music, your craft, and, you know, what has come out of you in this podcast as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first up, I worked in early childhood care for nearly 10 years. I discovered after I had my first son, I'd always worked in offices like reception and typing and stuff. And I just thought, I don't want to do that anymore. I want something different. And I thought, well, I enjoy looking after my son. Maybe I'll enjoy looking after other people's children. And it turned out to be the best thing I ever did, because it meets my needs of wanting to care and nurture, which is a really strong need that I have, a hands-on sort of need. And that also what I briefly talked about earlier about analysing and psychology and stuff. Like I have a really deep need to know why things happen and why people do what they do and question things. So it meets those needs. And I worked in a child daycare setting for 9 years, and I've recently started working in a kindergarten, like a preschool. I don't know what you guys call it over there, but so I'm there now working with preschool age children, and it's just so amazing. I just love it, and I swear I was put on this earth to do it, but I had to do all these other things to get to this point, which is also a little frustrating. But I don't think, honestly, I could have done it any earlier in my life. I had to be a mother of at least one and have a bit more time under my belt, I think, before I did it. But, so my singing, I started singing when I was 5. My first gig, I put that in inverted quotes, I sang it at my primary school's Christmas concert, and I have like distinct memories of the teacher holding the microphone for me, and she wasn't holding it in the right spot. So I remember moving her hand closer. So that's a bit of background into my level of need to control things, which has gotten better over the years. But that's, you know, you're going to do it properly, you know. I feel like that's my dad coming out. But, yeah, I've sang in choirs, I've sang in vocal groups, I've sang in small ensembles, I've sang in rock bands, solo stuff at weddings, at venues around town, and my sister and I have done a lot of stuff together. She's a very similar voice. I'm slightly lower and she's slightly lower and I'm slightly higher, and we blend really, really well. She usually sings the tune, I sing a harmony. Pardon me, we've got a pretty good thing going on, so we still sing at weddings and things like that. So, and I write and record music. Pardon me. I'll show you, this was my first album that came out in 2019. That's my horsey. I got someone to draw for me. So it's called Heart Songs, and so every song, they're not love songs necessarily, some of them are love songs, but it's about experiences that I've had. So at that point I was writing very strongly from things that I'd seen or done. And it's I won't say it's folk, but it's borderline. There's a lot of guitar. There's a couple of real upbeat, nice sort of songs. There's a lot of ballads and piano stuff. So that was 2019. And then I've started harking back to my experience with postnatal depression that I had after both my children, but more so after my second one. I'm working on an album at the moment called Wolf, like the big bad wolf. And it's going to be about 6 or 7 tracks, all about my experience. So it runs chronologically from when it was first coming on. So the first song's called Things Are About to Get Dark. So it's like, look out, it's coming back again, it's going to get you. Sorry, I talk about this so lightly now, but it's not a funny subject at all. And then it sort of runs chronologically till I get well and get better and things are, I won't say back to normal, because I don't think you're ever back to normal after an experience like that, but in a tolerable, manageable, living your life every day sort of way. So, yeah, I'm working on that with my producers are in Spain and Argentina. So I sit here in my little studio at home, record my vocals and send them off to them, and they mash it all together, the magic of the internet, and then send me back a song. And it's such a great experience because I live 500 k's between 2 major cities. And it's not accessible for me to travel. I've got 2 kids, you know, to upend my life for weeks at a time to go record in studios because we really don't have that sort of stuff down here. So it's really great. And I really wish this, and I shouldn't say this, I'm saying it again, but if the internet had come around earlier, I feel like I could have done so much more with my music. But it's like I'm 44 and it's, you know.
You're doing it. You're doing it.
But you know what I mean? It's like I felt so held back for so long. Oh, the tyranny of distance. And I never wanted to leave home. Like, I've lived in this town my whole life. My parents are here. My sister's here with her family. I think why it's almost like a defiance. Like, why should I have to move to do this? I can make this work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's bloody mindedness. I'm going to do it here. But yeah, it's just fun. It's satisfying. I love it. You know, it's just, and through the podcast, it's got me into different sorts of creativity. So I've been doing some painting and acrylic painting and watercolor painting because I've learned so much about different practices that I've just thought, stuff this, I'm going to have a crack at it. And I find that's a really soothing way to nurture myself when I need a bit of space. When I'm not ready to, you know, edit something or record something, I can fluff around with some paint. So it's been amazing for me. It's been a really amazing experience for me, and let alone meeting amazing people. Like, seriously, some amazing, amazing souls that I've met around the world. It's just amazing. It's so amazing.
It really is a world opener. It truly is.
Oh, man.
You know, I'm really curious because with your craft, so my craft is photography, and it's like, I feel like I am able, when I'm doing that, to say what I want to say, even though I don't have the words to say it, but I do it through the photos. But you actually have words in your craft. So how is that, like, as you talk about how fascinated you are with like getting underneath and like, finding the meaning, the deeper meaning in all of it. What is that process like for you? What does it feel like for you to be able to like take your own experiences and channel it into art? But this art is still pretty, I don't know what's in the word. Literal, because you're singing words, right? So how does that storytelling go in your song?
It's interesting. These tracks are very literal. Like you're sort of under no illusions what's happening in these tracks, right? The lyrics are quite explicit, I guess, in that way. But what I wanted to do, this deeper stuff, which I love, is use the actual instruments and the sound effects and any sort of distortion or that sort of stuff to paint the picture and to continue to tell the story. So in a few tracks we've got some really like, I don't even know how to describe, but particular sound effects that hark back to, I don't want to say someone losing their mind, but you can literally tell if you listen to the backings without me singing, you would know that someone's having a bit of a difficult time keeping themselves together. And I'm saying that in the nicest possible way. Because I've lived this. I can laugh about this now, and I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm making light of it, and I'm certainly not. But, changing the sound of my voice, there's some parts in tracks where it sounds like, there's some distortion placed on my vocal so it doesn't sound quite right. So those little tweaks that make that's how it sort of connects, like things aren't normal here. Things aren't smooth sailing. There's all these bumps in the road. Literally I'm not sounding how I normally sound, like things like that to tell the story. But it's interesting, with my painting, I found it really difficult when I first started painting to work out how I'd express myself because I'm so used to doing it with words. So I was like, but how do you get that across? How do people know what you mean? This sort of stuff. And then I spoke to an artist and she said, it's not about them knowing what you mean. It's about you putting down how you felt, and then they can interpret it however they like. So it's been different for me to get my head around this different mediums. It's more about, and I mean, there's some songs you'd listen to of mine and you're not exactly quite sure what's going on. So people take what they need from that. But it's literally like, I'll show you this painting I've been working on. So what I did this was the day that I got really annoyed with my husband because I started a new job and I needed help getting the kids to school on a particular day because my work started at 8:30 and so did their school. And so we had this massive conversation about, he was basically saying, well, my job's more important because I earn more and it always will be. So I can't, be 10 minutes late for my work. And I was just like, hang on a second. Like, we're supposed to raise the children and you want us to work, but then when we try and work, you don't actually help us or make it easy for us to do that. I was so wild. And that painting was the result of it. It was like this big black thing. I never paint in black. So it was like literally this frustration. And I made a great big Instagram post about it, about I'm so annoyed right now. And I was painting. And I had the orange that's in it I was playing around before I'd even started with that. I just had a blank canvas and I was playing with this technique of swooshing this orange paint. I thought, I'm going to leave that there because that's like me trying to break through, this is how I was making this. And then I have a lot of old music, like really old music. I don't even know how I got it. And I was looking through it and I was finding words that was describing how I was feeling. And there was a song, I don't even know, I can find it, but a particular song about who's taking you home tonight, or it was from the men's point of view of like they would sort out the women, the girls would be looked after by the men. It was like, this is bullshit. We could sort our own way to go home. Like, I was really going at it. So I tore them up and I stuck it on. You can't see them now, which is fine. It's in there, you know, and I went back to it over and over, and I might still go back to it if I'm really, you know, riled up one day. I went back to it the day Tommy Lee did his dick pic because that really annoyed me.
Your camera frustration.
You know, and so now, yeah, like, I don't know. It's like now I've learned another way to express myself, which is really good. So that's another tool that I've got to help me work through things when I need to. So
it's a win-win.
You know,
it's so funny because I'm sitting here like, how do you use actual words? And you're like, how do you not use words?
I know. That's the thing that challenges me. Like, I'm so used to using words.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. But isn't it? I could just feel, even though I don't have experience in that craft, just the way you're describing it, like to be able to utilize things that you wouldn't normally utilize, like just like a little voice distortion or, you know, XYZ to really support the story and the feeling. There's just no other feeling than seeing something or hearing something that you've made and knowing the experience you've had and being like, that's it. Like, that's it. It reminds me of, so sometimes I talk about when I went through my postpartum depression, there were the pictures I took because, you know, my mom was there taking a photo and I was smiling, you know, I really hated everything in the world. And the pictures I took where it was in the middle of the night and I don't know why on earth I was even taking a picture. I was just listening to myself and just snapping a photo and I looked like absolute hell. But those are the ones that I feel comforted in. I feel like I respond to in a way that it's like, I feel compassion for myself. I can see how far I've come. And I look at the ones that I was putting on a face and it doesn't represent anything I went through. And it makes me wildly uncomfortable. Like, even though they look quote unquote better, like physically of me, I guess, but like, it makes me so uncomfortable to see such a disjointed representation of like what was actually going on. So I don't really think that there can be a more, I don't know, healing thing than to be able to like lean into whatever it is that you're feeling compelled to do or make or create from that place. Because once you're in a different place later and you look back on that, I mean, there's just transformation that can happen in that reflection.
Yeah, and I find like the topic I'm singing about is very heavy, and I think this is why it's taken nearly two years just to get 4 songs done, because I get very reluctant to actually sing them because they were written at a time when I wasn't that great, and so then to have to go back into that headspace and relive that to project what I want to come out is really hard to do. So I'll put it off and I'm not the sort of person that puts pressure on myself to have things done by a certain time. When it comes to something enjoyable, I think it should be enjoyable. You shouldn't be like, oh no, I've got to do this when it's a fun thing. So I don't put pressure on myself, and my production team know that. So they're not banging on they're not like messaging, what's going on. They're like, when you're ready, you're ready. So that's been really hard. But I want to do them justice. I don't want them to come out half-baked when you won't get the whole experience of it. You know what I mean? The delivery of my vocal needs to be very, very authentic to get my message.
So what does that look like for you? Like, is that like do you set your scene? Like, what does that look like for you? Like when that does happen, like those few songs that you're like, okay, now is the time. What is it that compels you to do it?
Yeah. Well, usually I'm feeling down. If I'm feeling crap, if I'm having like, you know, on the waves, I'm on a downward bit, that's always a good start. And then often I will listen to the other tracks that I've finished to make me get back in that space. And it's not nice. I don't like doing it. But I'm very compelled to finish this. I want to get it out there because it's so, look, same with the podcast, like it opens an opportunity for conversation and for potential healing for other people. And I feel like it will be one of the moments where when this is done, it will be a weight lifted off me. It has helped me work through things over the years. But yeah, it's you just got to get into it. You just got to get yourself down there, which isn't fun, and then make sure you got something else at the other end to help you get back up again. So, doing it during the day is good, because then it's light when I'm finished. That's important. Pardon me, not to do it at night. And then just to waltz back out into life and get on with it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
I think that this idea of, I just feel like the most important things have this bittersweet quality to them to begin with. And I love how you have, a structure may not be the right word, but like, the things that have to be in place or that you want in place. Like, I'm not going to force myself into this, but when I'm feeling it, I will lean in, and that will be the thing. It should be light out. Blah, blah, blah. It's like you're doing the things to like keep yourself safe, but also honor the work that you are doing and your very specific, authentic vision for it. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of describing it. I am keeping myself safe, but I am making sure that it does come out the way I want it to come out. Yeah, because it will lose its impact. If it doesn't, if it's not authentic, I'll feel like it's a wasted opportunity. And even when one of the songs, I can't even remember what song it was now, Pieces of My Pain, that I put it into a song competition last year, and I went to Adelaide and performed it, and it won the state final. And even performing that, you sort of go into like almost like an acting phase, like where you've got to deliver this song and deliver this message. It's a really upbeat but very dark song. So even that just took a lot out of me. It was like, I need a drink. Like, this was just, it was really.
Is there a video of this? I want to see it.
So many people look, there's a really, really poor quality video that my husband took, because he's not very switched on with things sometimes. But, it's like you just do what you got to do. I don't know. And then that was finished, and I had the opportunity then to sing it in the national final in Sydney, but COVID went crazy. And so I got in touch. I basically hired someone to sing it for me, someone who lived in Sydney already, and performed it. So it got to be sang at the final, which I was pleased about. But, it's hard. I don't know, because these things, these experiences, and you'd be the same with your photography, like these experiences are so personal and they're a piece of you. And it's hard sometimes letting it out for other people to see, but I feel like it's really important to do that I feel compelled to put aside any sort of, I don't know, preciousness of myself and go, look, this is for the greater good. You know what I mean? Like, if this helps one person, then I'm, a happy person. I want to invoke change, and I want to empower people, and particularly women and mothers, that, they can get help if they need it, and what they're feeling is normal. You're not a bad person for having certain thoughts. It's normal. I want that to come across. And the fact that, mental health issues can affect anybody. Like, it doesn't matter who you are in life, or where you were born, or your upbringing, or your parents, or anything, social status, or, monetary status. If your brain is wired that way, that will happen to you. And there's no shame in that. That's the biggest thing, I think, like this shame thing that we're also afraid of saying we need help. We should be capable of sorting stuff out. We shouldn't have to ask for help, And even in a conversation, the podcast actually that's coming out on Friday with Fleur Harris, we were talking about the fact that I think we've lost the ability as mothers to ask for help, just to say, can you look after my child? Because it's like, well, he's your child. You should make sure that you're not gone so you can look after, this judgment thing is so strong that it sort of quietens us and makes us not want to speak up. So,
yeah. It's just, I remember going back to my work after my maternity leave, and it's like this feeling of like, must perform as if nothing ever happened, as if a human didn't come out of my body and I wasn't just feeding him from my body before I left. And like, it's absolutely insane. Yeah. It's insane. Yeah. I would get a.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite quotes, that I like to share, is that you said that you had to tell them that no, it wasn't okay. So that someone would then realise, because whatever they'd been heard or been taught, that it's like going on maternity leave, it's great, you have a great rest and it's all good fun and whatever. And it's like, no. So by you saying that changes that one person, and then they might change the next person. You know what I mean? That disrupting of the patterns. It's really interesting when you just said about this, you're expected to have this work life, and regardless of the fact that you were just feeding your child, now you're supposed to just waltz in and switch on. There's a podcast, a lady I had on the podcast called Dr. Sophie Brock. She's amazing. She's a motherhood studies sociologist based here in Sydney, and she's got a podcast called The Good Enough Mother, it's called. So it's breaking down all those stereotypes of what makes a good mother. And she had a guest on called Amy Taylor Kabatz on episode 79, and she was saying the exact same thing, that it's like society expects us to just do the mothering role and then switch that off and then go into work, and your work life doesn't, coexist at all. They're two completely separate things, and until that changes, mothers are just going to keep getting almost like treated like second-class citizens, that it's like, off you go do that baby stuff, you go do that house stuff, not as if that is actually what's keeping society going, Just makes me so
I even think back, even though I had, I really took a strong stance in like being honest about my experience, I'm still almost haunted by, even in the moment, it's like, those things where you look back and you're like in the shower and you're like, well, what I should have fucking said was, blah, blah, blah. Meaning we had like a special like testing thing that we had to do for work. And anyway, this location wasn't my normal location for work. It was like a 30-minute Uber Lyft drive outside the city, like in the lower, whatever. It was hard to get to. I was still nursing before I had to leave, XYZ, whatever. So I had been, I don't know, like 15 minutes late. People were still around having coffee, whatever. Then the following week, I was like pulled into a meeting, and the director was like, are you having, I just want to first ask, is stuff going on at home? I'm like, and he's like, I just want to, be able to support you if so, but like, it's not like you to show up late, but you're a leader here and blah, blah. And I didn't, at the moment, I was so like, because I'm, one of those people that like, to a fault, pride myself on like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, filled with shame. And then I was like startled by it. I was like, what? Because like no one's ever had to talk to me about something like that. And I just kept thinking, is something going on at home? Yeah. Do you know what it's like to have something have to suck on your nipples fast enough? You have to be like, okay, are you almost done? Are you almost done? Because I gotta go. My cab's coming and I gotta go. I'm like, what? Like, it's just, I know we found our way here, didn't we? We're so mad. Like, and it's just, what drives me wild is that like the ignorance of that. Like, I'm sure that person, fine person, thought they were coming at it from a caring place, the way they entered the conversation. Is there something going on at home? But it's just a whole world of absolute disbelief, like the lack of understanding.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, that's what I was about to say. It just shows that incredible lack of understanding, just no concept whatsoever. Yeah, it's astounding, isn't it? And that's what we're up against.
So what would you say is, having talked to all these amazing women that like have this kind of commonality amongst us, like what would you say is like one of the biggest common threads or like the strongest messages that you found amongst all of the interviews you've done, or something that surprised you in talking to this many women?
I got to say mum guilt is one of those big things. And surprised me was the other day when I spoke to this Fleur Harris, whose episode's coming out on Friday. She had to Google what it meant because she didn't feel it. And I was like, this is fantastic. This is what I want people to have to do. It's like, what is that? What is that thing? And I was so pleased. It's just wonderful. And I've had a couple of mums on that have been like, I don't feel it. They might not feel it in terms of their creativity, but then they might feel it in terms of their general mothering role. But yeah, mum guilt's one of those horrible things because, like I was saying earlier, I feel like we're conditioned to it by expectation. And the interesting thing with Fleur is that she never read any parenting books. Mm-hmm. She didn't have, I don't think she had anyone else around her that had children at that time. Her brother and her sister both had children soon after or around the time, but she didn't have people around her. So it was like she was in this nice little bubble that didn't allow her to get influenced by other things and then therefore feel judgment if she did or didn't do those things. So I feel like that's the key to this mum guilt, is getting rid of these expectations of how we're supposed to do things. Like we were saying before about what you're supposed to say to your child if something happens, or, whoever made these things, we've got to ditch it. We've got to change the story of that, get back to nurturing from what feels good for you. I know social media is great, allows us to connect, but it does bring up that opportunity for so much judgment. So I feel like we've all just got to, take things with a grain of salt and remember that Instagram and things on social media aren't necessarily real life. I know that a lot of people are sharing more things in real life now, the honest stuff, which is awesome. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and identity shift is another big one that is a repetitive sort of topic that I do love to talk about, how you saw yourself. You've always been this particular person, but just because you have a child, why does that change you, or how does that change you, or does it change you, or do you have to work really hard to not let it change you, or did you love that it changed you? Everyone's so different, and particularly creatives, if you are a person who's created your whole life, you'll find a way to create. You will make it work. And that's the thing I love hearing from people, that those practicalities as well. How do you physically do it? That's something that people like to share. And I think people like to hear that too, is like, oh, that's a good idea. Hadn't thought of it that way. I had a big shift in the way that I saw my creativity. I can't remember whose episode it was, but someone said one little thing and I went, oh, okay, I can look at it that way. Just these little tiny shifts that can help us along the way. So I just think it's great. The more sharing we do, the more we talk about things, breaking down the stigma attached to guilt, because you are allowed to, this ambivalence of motherhood, we're allowed to be really fed up with our child's behaviour and want them to sit up and eat their tea and love them at the same time. There's all these things that make it so conflicting and confusing. And that's also what I think society wants, a yes or a no. Society wants a black or a white. It wants an answer. It doesn't want these grey areas. And businesses, if you're working for someone, they don't want you to say, oh, I might come in tomorrow or I might not. It's just the way the world works. It wants certainty, and motherhood doesn't offer that. So I think that's where things get thrown up a bit and things can get challenged.
Well, it's so funny because certainty is also, it's such an illusion. Like, it's back to the desire to control. It's just because you want safety, but it's like there's risks in every single thing. It's just the ones that you're that are more normalized, or the ones that you're numb to, like, getting in your car every day, going to work, or blah, 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 whatever it is. It's just the ones that the most amount of people decided, well, that's a normal thing to do. And this idea of like sharing and sharing and sharing, it just goes back to representation. It's like, you know, I love seeing the support for the bottle feeding and also the breastfeeding. When you see too much of one thing, then the other, you know, there's like a negative impact on the other. And I think it's just this more representation out there so that more people can find, you know, glimmers of themselves out into the world and feel like they're less on an island.
Yes, absolutely. That's it, isn't it? It's like, you'll find where, it is that. It's representation. It literally is.
There's just no end to this conversation. So I don't even know how to end it, because there is no end. This is the theme of this conversation. More of these need to happen. We just need to have more conversations that don't feel like they have to be polished, that don't feel like they're about something that's specifically launching or coming out. No, it's a conversation for conversation's sake.
Yeah. Exactly. And I honestly, if anyone's interested in just hearing good conversation, just listening to this raw stuff, that's where the good stuff comes out. You know, it's not when someone's rehearsed a speech, you know, 20 times. It's this back and forth and the stuff that just organically comes out. That's where the good
Oh my gosh, it's like, it's actually like this idea of like, sometimes I'll hear people like, oh, I would, you know, it would be cool to have a podcast, but I think I'd run out of things to say. I'm like, noted. Anytime I'd say, I lost my train of thought, never cutting that out again, because I want people to know, you lose your train of thought. So what? Like, so what? Wait, or like when we pause, we're like, how did we get here? I don't know, but we're here. Now we're moving on.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. When I first started my podcast, I used to polish it up so much. I'd take out all the little bits and bobs. And even now, I've started leaving in when the kids interrupt me or someone else's kids interrupt, just a little snippet, because it's like literally this is the life of a mother. Your time is not your own. You have no control over what those children do sometimes, even if you've set them up with whatever. So I've started leaving that stuff in because I feel like it's just so much more authentic. And nothing's ever perfect, so it's a good representation.
Oh my gosh,
of that.
doing it messy is it's the only way that it even is possible to keep going. That is why I'm coming to you from when I first started the podcast, I bought a microphone, I got the headphones. I'm like, I can't. If I had to promise myself that every time I recorded an episode, I would have the microphone and the headphones and blah, 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 I would have stopped at episode 4. You know, so it's just like down and dirty. Like, this is the only way that this thing is going to live on. So that's just how it has to come.
Yep, that's it. You make it work. That's
Alison, can you please tell us where we can find your podcast? I will put all of the links in the show notes. And if there's a place where we can find and listen to your music.
Yeah, for sure. So AlisonNewman.net is my main page. So Alison has one L and Newman is Newman, just nice and plain and boring. And AlisonNewman.net/podcast is the landing page for the podcast. And from there's so much information on the front screen. I feel like I should take some of it off. But anyway, I like putting things on. And you can find, you know, the links to browse all the episodes, or you can search by the person you're looking for or whatever. And I've also got some like anyone's episode, like with what you do, Bianca, it's the show notes, all the whatever we chat about's in there. So if you hear something and you go, oh, what's that about? Probably chances are I've put a link to it in the show notes because I was interested in it too. So and you can find the links to the Instagram for my singing and for my podcast. So just have a bit of a fluff around. I love my my webpage. Like I do it on Wix, and I love fiddling around and putting all the links and all the photos. It's probably spend way too much time on it for what it gets looked at, but if you've got time.
I love it. I love it. And you will have to come back whenever you finish your album. Oh, you have to come back. You have to.
I'd love to.
I cannot wait.
Yes, it will be a momentous
Yeah,
occasion.
whatever it is, I cannot wait to hear all about it. Thank you so much, Alison. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get in on actual conversations with me, join the Help Me See podcast private Facebook group. Every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be hopping on live for Q&A on the latest episode and for free consulting if you need a bit of help thinking about ways to save your memories. Did you get something out of this episode? I really, really, really hope you did, and I would love to hear from you. I'm on a mission to empower you to feel peace in knowing that you are not missing your life. One of the best ways that you can support me is leaving a review, and honestly, I'd rather hear about the memory you saved because of this podcast rather than any kind of accolade. Tell me how this podcast has impacted you, and 1, I'll probably cry. And 2, I'd love to give you a shout out on the show. Take a minute and head out to the link in the bio to write a review now on the podcast.